Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast. I'm your host, David Higgins. I am so excited that you and I get a chance to talk about the world we love. Nonprofits are part of the community that is necessary to seeing the life and the smile, in my opinion. What we love about nonprofits is the fact that if corporate America could have fixed it, they would have found a way to make money and fix it. If political America could have fixed it, they would have tried to find some type of a law to pass and fix it. But the truth is, neither of them could. So you and I are in an experiment. And that experiment is to change our communities for the better. And that makes you a hero in my book. And we are here to talk about all the aspects that's going to elevate your mission so that you can be successful. As I was a director for over 30 years in the nonprofit world, I understand the pain of staying focused on the mission, but also having to fundraise, to stay focused on the mission, but always have to understand we have a marketing and a communication side of what we're doing. And even though we're trained and educated on what we love to do, which is the mission of our nonprofit, the truth is we have to be able to break our eyes away from that and focus on the funding raising aspect, the administration aspect, the communication aspect as well. And because of that, this podcast exists to be able to fill in those cracks, to encourage you along the way and bring you the information you need to be able to do a great job. My conversation today is awesome. I get a chance to speak with Casey Hill. He is a marketing expert. He is an email genius. And what he wants to talk to you about is your nonprofit communication tools, something that he understands. And he has actually gone as far as, I know when you see him, for those of you that have a few gray hairs like me, you go, oh, he's so young. But he's taught this stuff in university. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well as being able to manage it within the real world experience and helping your nonprofit in mind. Does that sound like a great idea? All right. So I'd like to introduce Casey Hill, who is our guest today. Casey, thank you so much for being a part of the Nonprofit Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, David. I love the mission and I'm excited to be here and to chat through this with you.
Now, just before we got started, you're bragging that you're in sunshine down in California and I'm stuck out here in the snow.
Yeah, I feel a little bit guilty, but San Diego weather has not been bad. It's been pretty moderate for me.
Oh, very good. Well, I'm really happy for you and a little jealous at the same time. Man, I just want to talk really quick. Your skill set, you represent a needed skill set in business and the nonprofit world. I know how important communication is. I mean, I'm on a podcast, right? But it's also from a nonprofit perspective, it is integral to what we're doing. And I know your entire career is based on helping organizations connect to their constituents, whether that be in business and sales, whether it be a nonprofit in their community and their donors. So I'm going to dive right into the question. One of the things that you rep is a program called Bonjoro. Can you give me kind of an idea what that is, who you are, and kind of how you guys connect?
Yeah, absolutely. So I run the growth team for a company called Bonjoro, and Bonjoro basically does personal video emails that help people build relationships with their donor bases or with their communities. And so there's a whole bunch of aspects of kind of the communication strategy, and I think we're going to get into some of the aspects of that today. But I think one thing that's often overlooked more than it should be, especially in the nonprofit world, is this idea of relationship building, this idea of really building robust donor stewardship. And it's very much a two-way communication path, right? If you look at relationships in the world, relationships have to have a back and forth. You can have amazing marketing, and it can even be effective marketing, but it's not relationship building until you are able to actually start conversations. So part of the onus on us as organizations starts to become, how can we communicate in ways that actually create real relationships with the people that are part of our communities? And so that's one of the things that I'm passionate about, and one of the things that Bonjoro helps facilitate for me and organizations work with.
Oh, I love it when somebody actually likes their job. It's a beautiful thing.
I do. I love it.
You were at UC Berkeley where you pursued entrepreneurial and small business operations. And that's really just become your heartbeat, kind of your life all around. When you were working at UC San Diego as a marketing professor, even though it was part-time, you're communicating this and educating the next generations, which to me says you actually know a little bit of what you're talking about. Somebody trusted you to teach other people. And especially in a place like UC San Diego, which I'm very familiar with that university, worked on the campus many times. And I know the level of demand and education that is there. You have focused on content marketing in that entire communication and space. Can you describe to me what content marketing is?
Yeah, absolutely. So content marketing is a lot of things, right? What we're doing right now, podcast, that's content marketing. Your blogs are content marketing. If you run a webinar, that's content marketing. Content marketing is all the stuff that you put out into the world to try to get people to come to you, right? And when we think about this in the vein of nonprofits, it's part of how do you create this idea of what your mission is, the work that you're doing, why this is significant, why this is so important. The way you translate that to your audience is often done through content marketing. And that can happen in emails, that can happen on a website, that can happen through video. And so there's a lot of different channels, and that kind of gets into probably the more important next step of content marketing, which is content strategy. Why do you build certain pieces of content for specific purposes, right? And so that's kind of one of the things that I teach. I walk people through from all sorts of different industries and sectors. How can you build compelling content that will be able to create that inbound pull? Because what you don't want to have happen is you don't want to start to have something where you're just always reaching out for donations, you're reaching out for donations, you're reaching out for donations, and it becomes a very one-sided type of dynamic, right? You don't want to have a friendship where it's all just like you just always ask, right? So the idea is how can you involve them? How can you make them really feel like they're part of your tribe and involve them not only with the mission, which is super important, but the other piece is with the people. The people behind an organization are so critical. And I think this is a missed ball sometimes for nonprofits. They make it all about the cause. The cause is super important, but people want to know who are the people behind the scenes too. Who's helping facilitate this? Who are the people who have dedicated their lives to this cause, this mission? That's super important too. So I think a great content marketing strategy includes both of those things.
True. I'm going to do a shameless plug. All right. But in this incredible book called Demystifying Fundraising Funnels, written by yours truly, David Higgins, we focus a lot of chapters on the importance and the power of email systems for your nonprofit communication systems to be able to get the message out and how to simplify that to the least time consuming aspect. You have email marketing certification through HubSpot, right? So this is something that you've actually invested into, not just saying, yeah, it's great, I've learned a few things. You got a certification in this specific area. How important is it for a nonprofit to having a solid email marketing strategy?
It's super important. It's super important, right? Because you want to have, as much as you can as an organization, you want to try to have what I like to call like an omni-channel approach, right? So if all you do is calling people, that's probably not going to work. If all you're doing is email, I'd probably advise that's not going to work either, right? You want to have a lot of different channels. So when it comes to email specifically, I think of it as a little bit in two buckets. So with email automation, I think your strong focus is around education. It's around how do you provide value about what all the pieces you're doing. And hopefully, if you do that in a way that is compelling enough, again, you draw people to you. The best organizations, some of the top charities I know, their people are just on, they're coming back automatically. They're not having to constantly pester those people. They build those relationships. So I think that education focus is super critical. And then there's another side, which is the video email side, which is what I do at Bonjoro. And that piece is a little bit more about relationship building, as I said. So how can you put a human face behind your company? How can you let someone know that they specifically are appreciated, right? Reaching out to say, you, David, thank you, David, for doing XYZ and being part of this mission, right? And so the way I like to think of an email strategy is to have both those pieces as integral. The education piece, where you're letting people know about what you're doing, you're letting people know about events, you're updating people about really why, making sure you're having this strong understanding of that why. And then you have the relationship building side, which is a little bit more one off, it's a little bit more individualized, but that piece is super critical too. And I think if you do both of those, if you do the relationship side and you do the education side in a compelling way, that's a really solid overall strategy that you could put together.
That's really good. All right, so I'm going to kind of put you in the driver's seat and say, okay, if you stepped into a nonprofit, they turn around, they said, look, we're going to give you the reins of the marketing department, specifically email. Can you build for me just here in the conversation, like the steps you would take to create a really good email strategy?
Yeah, great question. So what I would do if I was to step into the reins is I would always start with my existing base. That's always where I start. Before I go out, before I start like new acquisition strategies, I would always start with my new base. So oftentimes, and this a little bit depends on the size of the organization, but oftentimes it would be selecting, say, people that have made donations in the past, but they haven't made donations within the last 12 months. That's a common cohort that I like to kind of walk in. We know they have some connection to the cause. We know they've given in the past, but they're not there. And then with that group, I would step one, do the personal outreaches as an opening. So I would start by trying to really put that human touch point out in front and try to start a dialogue. So in those human outreaches, I would try to ask questions. I want to understand why people choose to support this cause. People are not a monolith, okay? They support charities for all sorts of different reasons. It might be a personal connection that they have in their own lives. It might be a handful of other reasons. So I want to try to understand that. So part one is I select that cohort, I do these personal outreaches. The second piece of this is I start to build an education strategy that is very much just about giving. I do not want to have a button where I'm directly asking for donations. Instead, I want to build a scaffolding where I'm providing as much connection to the cause and mission of what we're doing as possible. I'm highlighting the work we're doing. Hey, we built a house here. Hey, we had this incredible result. And I'm just bringing people into the fold as part of that process. And even in email automation, I still like asking questions. I always like trying to get people to communicate back with me. I think that is an undervalued piece that a lot of marketing that I see today feels very one sided. It feels very like, hey, here's this cool thing, or hey, we're doing great, but we need more. And like, it's always this need, pull kind of dynamic, right? Whereas I find if you have a great education strategy, you're creating dialogue, you're putting education out into the world, you can draw people back in. So that's where I would start as a step one if I was to kind of take the reins.
That is super good. I'm okay. This is kind of a curveball, but
That's okay. I like
when
curveballs.
you look at email servers, because it is certainly a part, and I know with your work with Bonjoro, you turn around and say, David, these are some really good servers. I'm not going to ask you to throw any under the bus, but I'm talking about like the Awebbers and the MailChimps and the ones that provide SendGrid, the ones that provide the email service. If
Sure.
it can be overwhelming for a nonprofit because it's actually they think it's simple the way they present themselves, but from a nonprofit perspective, you can get lost just in the intro trying to figure out how to do your first email, let alone do an email campaign. If you said, David, look, these are the ones I think are probably the easiest to work with, and for the money, the best buy. And by the way, if you say MailChimp, I'm turning off the conversation right now. But do you have any recommendations that you would recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, great question. And I think what I'll preface this by saying is that a lot of when it comes to system selection, a lot comes down to what people specifically need, right? So there's a lot of niche specific systems. You have like Virtuous, which obviously works in kind of like the charity world and the CRM side. You have a lot of tools that are kind of niched down. And then you also have tools that have multiple pieces. So it's like, do you want to just do email? Do you want to do email plus SMS? Do you want to do email plus SMS plus CRM? Right? So in the class of simple tools that do email, you named one of them, which is Aweber. You got Constant Contact. You got ConvertKit, right? Typically, there's a lot of different names actually I could throw out there because I do a lot of stuff around vendor selection. But I would typically want to talk with an organization and find out what specifically they're trying to accomplish. So ease of use is one piece, right? But depending on what someone's trying to use something for, that can be a critical cog, right? Because sometimes someone says, well, yes, I'd like to do SMS as well. And we'd like to do, say, physical mailers, or we'd like, and they have these different needs. And then that might segue over into tools like ActiveCampaign as an example. That's a little bit more robust and has a few more pieces connected to it, or HubSpot, or and so those kind of come into the conversation depending on the complexity. But if you're a small organization and you're listening to this and you're just like, okay, I want to start doing email, I want to start simple. Those are a couple of the tools that I just named that I think are straightforward. They're easy to use, the email design builder. They have straightforward little automation drips that you can use. And that's by no means exhaustive, though. There's many, many more tools. So it's a wide open market. So some of it comes down to your goals.
Can you give me a list of your favorite 5?
My favorite 5. Yeah. So I would say my favorite 5, I would go ConvertKit, Aweber. Constant Contact is an interesting one because I used to see it more commonly, but not quite as much. ActiveCampaign, I'm a fan of. I use ActiveCampaign myself. I have a lot of people in the ecosystem that use ActiveCampaign, so I like them. Keep and Ontraport sometimes come up, not as commonly, but there are ones that kind of roll in. And then HubSpot, I think if analytics is a top preference, those are some of the ones that I think I kind of commonly see.
If we're talking, thanks for that, by the way. I know I kind of put you on the spot.
No, it's okay.
When we are talking to a small, medium-sized nonprofit, the budget's always tight. It's like they never have money to do marketing, but they've got to, rob Peter to pay Paul type thing. So we're looking at a nonprofit. They have 4 to 5 staff members and maybe another 4 to 5 full-time volunteers that are coming and being involved. All right. Kind of painting you the picture here. Okay.
Yep.
And they're saying, David, we've got to get our message out. We need to start building relation with the community. So let's do what your recommendation is, which is a email drip campaign. Okay. We can get that set up, spend a weekend, write out 25 emails and have them hitting them over the next 6-7 weeks, right? And start trying to connect to our, the database that we've been able to gather for emails. When you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, now I need to budget it. For me to budget something like that, give or take a little bit, right?
Yeah.
What does a nonprofit need to budget to realize the outcomes that we're kind of painting here in a picture?
Yeah, so that's actually kind of the good news. It's relatively inexpensive, even for a relatively small organization, if your contact list size is small. So ESPs or email service providers typically charge by contact volume, right? Some of them charge also so you have contact volume and email sends. So those are like the 2 primary metrics, right? But if you're a small list, for a couple $100 a year, you can basically put into place an ESP. And similarly, for some tool like Bonjoro, if you're looking to do the personalized relationship building side, same thing, a few $100s a year, again, depending on the exact parameters. So I think overall, even for relatively small organizations, it is accessible to get in and build a drip that you're going to start to deliver content with. And it is accessible to start to do personal videos as well. And one of the things that I like to tell people, I'm a very data-driven person. So I always like to encourage people to run comparative tests, right? So most organizations have some way that they're doing fundraising right now. So your data, your kind of hit rate, your frequency. So when you start to implement some of the things that we're talking about on this show, I think what I would do is run a comparative test. And that way it's very easy for you to see what that ROI is. And a lot of the largest charity organizations that have worked with us, they actually start in kind of a trial period by doing exactly that. Oftentimes like, this sounds good, but we're not sure if our team's going to want to do video, and the board will be kind of skeptical. So I'll say, totally understand. Do half of it exactly like you're doing. Do the other half with these personal video touch points. Keep track of exactly how much you're fundraising with that comparative test, and then run it through that.
That's really good. You're talking, I started troubleshooting as I'm going through this. I'm putting together a 25 email drip campaign for to reach out to the community. The end result is to kind of raise up the next generation of donors. I'm trying to build a relationship with the community, and I have this list that's been given to me from people who have connected to us in the past, sometime in the last couple of years, where they've come to kind of a fundraiser, they've come to an outreach, and they've left us their email. So we feel comfortable emailing them. So I turn around and I take Bonjoro, and I can actually do 25 different videos, attach them to those 25 different emails, and send them out to that 1,200, 2,000 email list. Am I getting the picture correct?
You can do that. I would kind of put a slight modification to typically how it's normally used. So Bonjoro is typically used in a one-to-one capacity. So Bonjoro is typically used when you want to actually create a one-to-one touch point with someone who's part of your donor community. So that is the conventional way this is used. You can take a video, you can take a standardized video, and you can embed it inside of an automation as well. So your use case is absolutely accessible. People do that all the time, especially when there's a person of import, like a board member, or sometimes they'll get a celebrity or someone to record a video that they want to then embed. But typically the idea is to actually have that one-to-one type of interaction when it comes to Bonjoro specifically. So the answer is yes, it can be used that way. But if possible, when you can isolate, say, a group of your top 100 best prospects or best donors or people that left larger donations but have then gone quiet, those are the people that I would target to do those personal one-to-one. And then I would have your automation and your drip running overall as part of that general education process. So I see them very much as complementary to work in tandem.
Excellent. Thank you for clearing that up. I totally see the power of being able to receive a video from an organization that I like and I respect, but I'm not really invested into, and looking at somebody calling out my name, David. Man, I just thank you so much for being interested in what we are and what we're doing. We have this event coming up and want to invite you to be a part of it. And thank you so much. And feel free to bring your family. We got a table for you. And it's coming from the director directly to me. That's got a great pull to it.
Yeah, I think absolutely it does. I think there's something kind of special about that. I'll share a link of one with you so you can share it with people so they can kind of see an example of it. But I do think that when you see that, when you hear your own name, when someone acknowledges something that you were a part of, so like, thank you so much for helping us build this school or for contributing to this kid or doing XYZ, I think that's really powerful. And the other thing I'll say too on the email side is, if possible, I know a lot of nonprofits don't have access to this, so that's why I add the caveat of if possible. But I'm also a huge fan of segmentation. So segmentation means that if you know that this group of people came from a specific event and you can reference that event in your communications, right? Or you know that they came from this campaign, any opportunities you have to segment down is always going to be more personal and powerful, even if you're sending to a group of 400. That's super important. So if you're not segmenting right now, that's something I would recommend to start to do, right? So moving forward, try to make sure that you have those identifiers so your communications can be that much more personal and therefore more persuasive.
NPR News has said, and I mentioned it in the book, Demystifying Fundraising Funnels, that 38% of nonprofits are battling to keep their doors open. In my opinion, it's because they just don't have a solid grasp of online fundraising and community connection using online tools. It's just this gap in the educational process. They've been educated on how to accomplish their mission and be able to be that part of society and heal that part of society. This is a whole nother tool set. Like, you went to college, you understand this, you focused on this, and it's an easy language for you. And for others, they're feeling that 38%, they feel like this is a difficult language to try to grab a hold of and do have the time to learn it.
Yep.
And in my opinion, that 38% for the most part represents the part of the communities that we need the most. They're the ones serving the underprivileged. They're the ones that aren't the glamorous nonprofits, the food banks and the homeless shelters and the teen rescue centers and these type of things. Can you walk me through a simple step approach you would use to, if you stepped into an organization, into a nonprofit, to help them turn around a negative situation into a positive situation? I know we talked a little bit about how to set up an email system, but I'm talking about a negative online approach and turn it around and muscle it to get into a positive, okay, now we are engaging the community in an online format.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that to me, the place you start is you start around focusing on relationships specifically, and you also start small because you are right. It does become daunting. There's a million different kind of bells and whistles and fancy objects that you can run into. So one of the things I'll say is, as a starting point, don't try to do it all at once. Try to take a specific problem that you might have. Like, again, like, I'm going to focus on this cohort or this group. And then where I would start is trying to create conversations. So we're talking about a couple different ways to do that. We're talking about video, we're talking about email marketing. There's actually a ton of others. But I think if you start to change your metrics a little bit, one of the first things I would do is I would say, can you create 50 conversations? Can you have 50 back and forth with people that are part of your community? Instead of having it be purely focused on dollars raised right now. And I'll tell you, if you focus on conversations, I have a strong inclination that it's going to lead to donations raised, right? That is what I've seen time and time again. But it's a little bit of a rewiring of the thinking. I find from my personal experience that nonprofits kind of tend to have a little bit of an older way of going about and thinking about these processes. They've been doing it for a long time. And I think that with access to new technology and new tools, there's new ways for you to kind of start to create those relationships. So I would take a step back and I'd say, okay, starting out, I'm going to have my goalpost be creating conversations. And then to create conversations, then I think it takes a step back and really trying to understand what the people in your community value, right? So part of this is as an example here, when you start to, let's say you start to do email automations and you start trying a couple different things. One is you highlight the end product. One is you highlight the team members and you do a little profile of, here's Carrie who's on our team and she's doing all this awesome stuff. She delivers the XYZ. Start seeing what resonates with people. What are they opening? What are they clicking on? What are they engaging? Try to understand your audience. And when you do that, that can also help you kind of create your little buckets or segments, as I said. Okay, I find that 70% of my audience really seems to engage with this type of content. This portion seems to really resonate with this type of content. And you then from there can start to start turning that momentum around. Because what happens is oftentimes is people have an age-old strategy, and when things get tough, they kind of just dig in more, just make more calls, it's just more of the same. So I think that instead it's take a step back, focus on fundamentals, realize that all business, whether it's in the private sector or whether it's nonprofit, it's person to person, right? Person to person is what is fundamentally important. So you're trying to figure out how to do that in a sustainable and scalable way. So that's where I would start.
How can someone connect with you, Casey?
Yeah, if anyone wants to shoot me an email, my email is just Casey, Casey at bonjoro.com. So if anyone has questions about any of the stuff we're talking about on the show, more than happy to hop on a call and chat with people.
Fantastic. If they want to do any research into Bonjoro, how do they do that?
They can just go to bonjoro.com. So that's bonjoro.com. Hop on. You can check it out. We even have a little nonprofit tab so you can see some nonprofit use cases, see some example nonprofit videos, and kind of go through how organizations are leveraging that.
Absolutely awesome. At the end of every show, we do a shout out to nonprofits that we think are doing an amazing job. It's kind of like the thing we do. And I kind of gave you kind of heads up, maybe by only a few hours, that I was going to do this. And I hope you had a chance to find somebody that you think is an amazing nonprofit. But I'll go ahead and go first, and then I'm going to throw it over to you. Is that all right?
Sounds good. Yep.
Awesome. I want to talk about an amazing organization real quick and give them a high five. It's their mission of the C5 Youth Foundation of Southern California, also known as C5LA, is to change the odds for high potential teens that from risk-filled environments, inspiring them to pursue personal success and preparing them for leadership roles in college. And the Children and Youth Development Program in Los Angeles is not only an organization that is reaching youth, but they have been looked at from all over and scrutinized. They've been looked at by major nonprofit accountability groups and saying they are doing an incredible job. So it's not just they're accomplishing their mission, they're doing it with class. They're doing it in a way that make you proud to be able to stand next to them. If you're in the Los Angeles area or you're coming through that area and you're saying, look, we want to see how a good nonprofit that works with you operates, I would encourage you to check out the Children and Youth Development Program, or you can find it under C5LA or C5 Youth Foundation. This is the last thing I want to do, just a shout out for them. That is, did you know almost 100%, get that, 100% of the youth they work with not just graduate from high school with honors, but move on to college. They graduate, they move to college, and they're taking a population that would not even make it through high school, and they're becoming college students and being able to build a career and become part of their future by being able to step into that in a wonderful way. So real shout out to C5 LA, and what a great job you guys are doing. Thank you for having the vision you have. And Casey, your turn.
Yeah, first off, I just want to say I absolutely love this. It's so important for us to give publicity and to shine a light on great organizations. So I think it's so cool that you guys do this. The one there's a lot of organizations that are close to heart for me, but Big Brothers Big Sisters is one that is super important to me. It's an organization that I've been a part of personally, and just to see the transformation that can happen in a kid's life from having that strong male or female role model that can kind of come in and spend time with them, and it's It's something that's so powerful. I've done it. A lot of people in my family have done it. People in my social circle have done it, and I've seen those transformations firsthand. So they have all sorts of branches all over the United States. And actually, I'm not sure if it's international or not. I don't know the answer to that, but I know they have it all over the United States. And so I'd love to give a shout to Big Brothers Big Sisters. Awesome organization. And if anyone has ever considered it, just a strong ringing endorsement from me that I think it could be really transformative.
Awesome. Casey, it's been awesome having you as a guest today. Thank you so much for taking time and chatting with us.
Thank you so much for having me, David. I appreciate it.
And for all of you that are listening, we need you. You are an important part of taking our communities into a place where there are more smiles, there are people sleeping better at night, there's more hope and more kindness. As we say here all the time, celebrate kindness. That is what we are about. And thank you for the job that you do. You have an amazing day until we speak again. Keep smiling. Things are looking up. Bye now.